you, Elena. Nice to see everybody today. It looks like we have individuals joining us from around the world, which is really one of the uniquenesses of this Zoom environment. Although I'd much rather be with you in person, as some of you I have still yet to meet. When Elena sent me an email a while back asking if I'd be interested in coming to speak to you today on a topic of we culture versus me culture, or me culture versus we culture, it, it really rang true to me because it's an internal debate, I think, that we all sometimes face as to whether we should be doing things for me or whether we should be doing things for we. And there is a lot of work that has gone into the study of me versus we culture that a lot of people with a lot more knowledge than I have done. But I'd like to look at the me culture versus we culture from a few different areas. And one is the me culture, we culture related to age. And I say that because if you think about it from when you were younger, maybe you were in this position, maybe you weren't, maybe you knew people who were in this position, but it's me, me, me. I want, I want, I want. There's no concern beyond your little bubble at that point. How many times do you see a child saying, I want, I want, I want? Or give me something? Now, that doesn't necessarily go away when you get older, but we hope that it would. So the question is the me versus we related to age? Don't know. I know I tend to see it more, and we tend to see it more when we see someone who's younger. Well, if it's not age related, is it situational? Is it based on the situation that you find yourself in? In other words, if I'm by myself doing something, it can only be for me, one would think, because there is no we component at that point. There is no others. If you're going to college or university, are you going to college or university for others? Or are you going to college and university for yourself? That would make it a me thing. I know when I went for my master's degree, it was strictly for me. I wanted to gain something from it. I wanted to learn something from it. It wasn't going to change the world. It was just going to change me. So is it the situation that you're in that can become the me versus we piece? Now we think about the district trio. Let's think about the district trio. And Elena is on the line with us today, PQD. She has to look at things from several different areas. She has to do her role. That's a me thing. But she has to do her role to the point where it affects others, to the benefit of others. So it becomes a we thing at that point. She needs to support her district trio. She needs to support her members. But she also needs to do for her. So is it two separate entities that have to stand alone, or based on the situation, can there be overlap where you're getting something from you, for you, the me, and you're doing something for others, the we? Then we have to look at outside of the age related, the situational relation. Is it generational? Is the baby boomer generation different than the X generation, the Y generation, the Z generation, whatever generation is going to come next? Is the view of working together for the betterment of the whole different than working together for myself? And historically, we say that the baby boomer generation, which I am a member of, was the generation that did for themselves. They didn't rely on others. We were self-contained, we were self-driven, we were self-led, and we worked that way. That's the look. But contrary to that was the fact that we also knew that we needed to be there to support our families and our friends. So although generationally it's looked one way, there are layers underneath that have to be viewed as well when it comes to what type of culture we're in. There's a belief that the later generations now are all we-style generation or me-style generations, excuse me, because there is not as much or doesn't appear to be as much social interaction. Social interaction nowadays is, well, you can't see it, but that was my cell phone, right? Everyone seems to be attached to the cell phone and not attached to each other anymore. Does that make it a me generation, a me culture versus a we culture? However, they are sharing more information. They are more public with information than I think many generations before them. The advent of social media has changed that. But let's be honest. If you're on Facebook, if you're on Instagram, if you're on Twitter, and someone is sharing with you what they're having for breakfast, is that really making society better? No, it's just sharing information. So is it a betterment? Or is it just a way to share information with the 3,475 friends you have on Facebook, of which 2 you know, who really don't care anyhow? So is that helping? Is it allowing you to be part of a we grouping? Is the we culture and me culture different now than what it was? Is the importance of being out there in a community as important nowadays as it once was? How many of you still like to go out to dinner with friends, have a conversation over a table? Or do you go out to dinner with friends and on your cell phone you're texting, what are you going to have for dinner? I don't know. What are you going to have? Should we order a bottle of red or a bottle of white? Or are you carrying on a conversation? Have you ever gone out to a restaurant or gone out to a local club, bar, and you just watch people who are on their phone all the time with no interaction? How can there be a we at that point? I can't see it. So is it generational in how the culture has come to be, how the separation has come to be? Or, and this is the one that I find to be the most interesting and the one I'm going to talk about a little bit more. Is it cultural? Is it cultural and based on where you were born, where you were raised, the culture of your country, East versus West philosophy? There has been a lot of study that has gone on into looking at cultures based on whether they are individualistic cultures or collective cultures, and how that impacts the way people relate. There was a professor by the last name of Hofstede who has done a cultural awareness mapping. It's done it for a number of years. And what it does is it looks at the country of origin, not just the individual. So, is it a country who by nature is very collective in the way it views things, where it's very paternal, if you will, in the fact that children help out the parents, that the unit there is much more important, that the success of the whole is much more important than the success of the individual. I was reviewing the Hofstede website a couple years back for a committee I was working on where we were looking at what motivates individuals. Essentially, can you incentivize people to do things? And what we were finding was that if it was a more individualistic society, a we society, if you will, incentives were much more important to that individual. Where if it was more of a collective society, where it was for the betterment of the group, individual recognition was not as important as recognition for the success of the team, of the group as one. And that changed the way we started thinking about things and how we started viewing organizations, how we started viewing clubs, how we started viewing districts, how we started viewing why individuals did things the way they did. We had to start putting ourselves in a different mindset to figure out what the difference was and what was causing it. Many of us have a basis of understanding when it comes to teams and working within teams. But in 2020, the world changed what a team was and how a team worked together. Let's think about it prior to 2020, to that pandemic whose name we will not mention. Prior to that, we were a very social organization when it came to teams. Your team would get together, your club would get together, you'd spend time in person. You had some of that after hours interactions, after meeting interactions. Your teams, if you were working in teams, would be at the table together, talking things out. And then in 2020, the world said, no more. No more. You can't be meeting together. You have to be separate, physically separated. The dynamic shifted. It became very easy to not participate as much. It became very easy to find excuses to not attend meetings. It became almost immediately a me society. Because it's just me in this box. It's me who has control over that red button at the bottom of my screen. You know, the one that says leave. Harder to walk out of a room of people. Easy to walk out of this. And the society that we were in changed overnight. And the culture changed overnight. And I think that we shifted from that we culture, that in-person or that style culture, to being in a me culture. Time became much more precious at that point. A decision on whether to attend my 19th meeting online today became my right, became your right. It became all about me and less about we. This worked well for individuals who were used to being in that type of culture beforehand. It was very difficult for those who were in the we collective when this happened. Because now, what we were used to, the relationships we were used to, the norms that we were used to, were no longer there. They were completely gone. What we knew as a team before was no longer a team. What we knew as a club meeting was no longer a club meeting. What we knew as social interaction was no longer social interaction. It was somebody talking to somebody through a screen. And I'm not going to pick on anybody, but there are individuals who get on meetings who don't turn their cameras on. Do you even know if they're there? Sandra, I wasn't picking on you. I saw her turn her camera on right away. But when you're in the room with somebody, you can't just disappear. You can't just say, hey, I'm here, but you know what? I'm wearing my pajamas today. I don't really want to be seen on TV. So I'm not going to turn on my camera. And it became very individualistic, became very much me and very less we. When the teams started to develop and try to get into a norm, we found that conflict was starting to become a little bit more of a norm because of this separation, because it's about me now and less about me. When Elena introduced me and she talked about my visiting clubs during my presidential year, I took office of president in the heart of the pandemic, in a time where me, who likes the we culture, had to be put in a me style situation. And I wasn't used to that. Wasn't used to that. And I had to find a way to make it more about we than about me. And during that time is when I developed the International President's World Tour, which is what Elena was alluding to, where I felt that we needed to find ways to keep our organization together, to let everyone know that we were there for each other, that we weren't just all of a sudden going to be, 335,000 siloed individuals with no ability to connect, with no ability to we. And that's when I started visiting clubs around the world. Not just visiting for the sake of visiting, but visiting and taking on roles. Because I wanted to experience it, because it was about the we, it wasn't about the me. I didn't do that for myself. I did that to make sure that we all stayed connected, that as an organization, it was the collective that was there. And I got to tell you, I learned a lot of things about the world by going around and visiting countries that I had never been to before, countries that I will probably never get the chance to visit before. I got to see that although we felt that individuals were going to start disconnecting, dedicated individuals who were out there were more focused on how the we was going to work. Leaders like Elena, like Sandra, like others that are on the phone here today could have easily stepped away, easily said, I can't do this. It's not for me. Tired of being on Zoom. Don't know how to lead in this environment. And for every time they could have stepped away, they took a step forward. They stepped deeper into the unknown, trying to figure out ways to work for the collective good of others, to help ensure that our members, our friends, our families stayed connected. How many of you are introverts out there? How many of you are extroverts? Yes, I know a couple of you are for sure. When 2020 happened, when the shutdown of the world happened, I think for introverts, it was a much easier sell because introverts need that time to recharge. I'm an introvert myself, but for extroverts, it was very tough to suddenly be cut away from the norm. Not only from the norm for a short period of time, but the norm for nearly 3 years. And that's the same thing that happened with the me and we culture. Those who were me culture oriented, this shift had very little effect on. But those who were we culture oriented, this was like getting hit with a rock. Because all of a sudden, the we wasn't there. And the shift in psychology, the shift in belief is very difficult. But I wonder, as time has gone on, as the pandemic has started to subside, the issues will never go away that it caused. We know that. But has it started to shift philosophy and thought from those who were of the me culture into a society, into a cultural belief that there is much more out there? Is it now a we culture, or is it just so overwhelming now that people will start to step back? I love to sit down with some introverts who have dealt with this over the last few years, and when things start opening up, going, has your philosophy changed? Do you want to get out in society more now? Or are you still okay with that introverted feeling? When extroverts started to see the world open back up, were they ready to go running out there full force? Or had they learned something from the introverted philosophy, the introverted style, where maybe there's more of a balance now between the two? I don't think you ever get away from the we versus me philosophies, the we versus me cultures. But can we shift the way we look at it? Anytime we throw a word in that's negative or perceived as negative, it automatically skews the way we view things. So the word versus, by its sheer nature, makes it sound like there's two opposite ends, one against the other. It's me versus we, which would say that it's a bad thing to have two opposites. I don't know that that's true. Can we shift the way we view it to a me and we view, where the two are uniquely different? The two cultural views are uniquely different. But can they work together to the betterment of both groups? How many of you have ever heard the saying, what's in it for me? Right? When someone comes into our club as a member, they want to know what's in it for them. When we buy something, when we see an ad to buy something, we want to know what's in it for me. What am I going to get out of it? That's a great view of things, to figure out what you're going to get out of something. Why should I join? Why should I spend this money? Why should I do what I'm doing? What is in it for me? But that's not necessarily a singular view. See, we all joined Toastmasters for ourselves. We didn't join Toastmasters for anybody else. Right? There was no we culture there. It was a me culture. I needed to become a better communicator. That was me. You all joined for your own reasons, but they were me reasons. Well, maybe some of you had a boss who told you, for the betterment of your career, you might want to join Toastmasters, but that still became a me, I need to keep my job philosophy. Right? But when you joined, when someone else joined your club, and they started sharing their stories, some of those stories you could relate to. And although they were their stories, the me stories, they were we related, although no one realized it at the time. I'll give you an example. In 2009, excuse me, I was diagnosed with stage 4 throat cancer. And I had my surgery, I had my chemo, my radiation, but I never spoke about it to anybody. And embarrassment, I think, by nature. And two is because I didn't want to have anybody look at me differently, look at me like you're sick, like you're weak. I didn't want that view. So for a long, long time, I never told that story. It was me, it was mine. And we all have stories like that. I was speaking at a conference in Texas in District 50, and my keynote was on owning your past, whatever that meant, making mistakes, who you are, what you've done. And I decided I was going to tell that story for the very first time. I was going to own it. I wasn't going to let it define me. I was going to define it. And I got done and I gave the speech, and like every good Toastmasters meeting I've ever been to, they clapped, whether they liked it or not. And I got off the stage and was walking through the crowd, shaking hands like we always do. And I felt a tap on my shoulder. And it was a gentleman who stopped and said, "Thank you." I had no idea what he was thanking me for, but I took him aside afterwards and I said, "So, why is it that you felt the need to thank me?" And he said, "I'm getting ready to go through the same surgery that you've just talked about. And now I know that I'm not alone. Now I know that others have faced the same thing and how they dealt with it." It was a me story. It was a we collective in the fact that it benefited others. Me's and we's don't have to be separate. Me's and we's can work together for the betterment of all. Every time you share a story that's a me story, somebody out there needed to hear it, and it became a me. When you work on a team, you're going to get something out of it. It's going to be a me. You're going to learn a skill. You're going to learn something. It's going to be a me. But the team will succeed as one. And that's a we. The only difference between the me and the we is who's benefiting for it. But it doesn't mean that both don't benefit together. And I think if we change our philosophy, if we change from versus to and, we can all understand better that working together, both have a place in society, both have a place in culture, and both will allow us to get to where we want to get to. I can't force my me on you. You can't force your me on me. But together, we can get to wherever we need to go, can accomplish whatever we need to accomplish. Each one of you on this screen today, each one of you who attended here today, came here because of a me, not me. You collectively me's, not me. Because it was something you wanted to hear. There was something you wanted to gain. There was a reason that you wanted to be here. When Elena contacted me, because although she thought I could bring something here, it was a we view that she had, because she wanted this to be shared with others. Me's and we's are two opposite sides of the same coin, but they both spend the same way. They both accomplish the same thing. And working together, the only difference is the letter at the beginning. It's either a W or an M. But they're not different in the fact of they're all looking to gain something. I would encourage you, when you see situations, when you're involved in situations, and you're trying to understand why the individual, why the societal norm is the way it is, ask yourself, is it a generational thing? Is it a situational thing? Or is it a cultural thing? Put yourself in the other person's shoes for just a short minute and see if it changes your perspective on what you're seeing. I've had the fortune to be able to travel a lot of places in the world. And I tell individuals who are going to do this that they need to understand that society is bi-directional. Culture is bi-directional. It's not just what you see, what you hear, what you feel, but it's what others see when they see you. It's what others hear, and it's what others feel. Me and we are the same thing. Try to understand where someone else is coming from. Try to understand what's driving them before you make that decision as to whether that person is just in it for themselves or really whether they're trying to gain something, but they're also trying to help a collective. And I think that will change the way you view the world around you. I will also encourage you to look up the Hofstede group that I mentioned and look at countries out there. Do a comparison to see which countries are more individualistic, which countries are more collective. United States, sorry to say, we are a very individualistic country. If you look at our culture, we're one of the top two. Australia, I think, is the other one. I think Australia is just above us in individualistic societies. When you look at Asian countries, you'll see that they're often very collective societies. But it'll give you some insight into what is the driver, I think, for some individuals and some cultures out there. I'm trying to leave here today wondering whether this was a me situation and that I gained out so much, or whether it was a we situation and that we were all able to gain something from it. And I know Elena has asked that I do a Q&A for a little bit as well, which I'm going to be glad to do if there's time. And maybe then it'll truly be the more side of the we than the me just speaking into the blue screen. Thank you for your time today. It's been a pleasure traveling through the Zoomerverse to be with you and to see so many people who I haven't seen in a while and get a chance to reconnect. Elena, I turn the floor back to you.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you very much for your inspiring speech. And now I welcome you all to raise your questions. If there are any, please unmute yourself or put your hands up so I can call you. No questions? Nothing? Wow.
That was easy.
No questions for Toastmasters? Okay, Celine.
Just a big thank you.
Hi, good evening. I must start by apologizing for not switching my camera on. I did feel the mention there when it was referred, but I haven't been feeling very well. So to distract everyone, it was the best option. But I do have a question because I did find the session very, very interesting on what defines a we culture, a we society versus a me society? Because I think each society can experience both at the same time. So how do we distinguish and how do we label one society as a me society over a we society? Thank you.
Celine, thank you for that question. And I think that's a good one. I hope you feel better. I'm sorry that you're under the weather. I know there's a lot of that going around. I think when you look at what is a me society versus a we society, is you need to look at how does the society work as a unit? So, for example, when you look at societies that are very much family oriented, that would be what we would call, a more of a we society where people are working to help one another to improve, to gain, to grow, to support. The opposite would be the me society where I'm only looking out for myself. Someone will step over somebody else to get to the front of the door and not worry about it. You see a lot of that in corporations, for example, right? Where someone's trying to get that golden ring, that top job, where it's, hey, that's all about me. I'm not gonna care about anybody else. Going to step right over them to get that position. That's a me solely for me. It's how the group functions for betterment. I think is one of the easiest ways to look at it, and it's whether it's betterment for the whole or betterment for the individual. And I think you see examples of that on a regular basis where in some societal norms it's all about the family, it's all about the group, it's all about the team working together. Where in some societies you can absolutely see it's all about the individual and the individual goal. Now, there's a saying here in North America, I don't know if it rings true anywhere else. He who dies with the most toys wins. Right? And that's individualistic. That's all about me getting as much as I can to have as much as I can. It's not saying, hey, if we work together and we all get something out of it, we all win. It's, hey, if I've got the most, I win. That's individualistic.
I would like to make a question. So we have districts that are, let's say, a part of the same country.
Mm-hmm.
We have districts that are many countries. We have districts that are, let's say, 2 or 3 countries.
Mm-hmm.
How we can play with this we and me in order not for a club to be interested only in their club and be interested in area, or a club be interested in division activities, or let's say higher district activities. How we can inspire members to not look only themselves, but the whole team.
Yeah, I think that's a great question because we have that, right? Clubs that never step beyond their club for anything. And I think we have to change the way that we sell that idea. And what I mean by that is oftentimes you'll hear a club say to a member, the club needs this, right? The club needs you to go to club officer training. The club needs you to complete a speech. Does the individual really care what the club needs? No. We need to shift it and say, by giving speeches, you can help develop these skills. By giving speeches, you'll gain this. Because that's individualistic. That's a me. What am I going to gain out of it, right? What am I going to gain by doing this? And then you can take and shift that dynamic a little bit by saying, you've brought a lot of great things into your club. You've been able to lead them. You've shown that leadership skill. You've influenced people with the stories you've told. And there are others that need to hear that story. There are others who need to gain the skills that you've shown, that you've been able to contribute. And if you could step out beyond the club and provide those skills, help others gain those skills, more people would benefit from it. It's not we need you to come out of the club and go to the area and become an area director. There's no reason for that, right? But because, Elena, because you've got these really great leadership skills, you know how to mentor people, you've provided some great ideas to your club. We think that there's others that would benefit from your doing that. And you're not going to do this alone. We're going to make sure that you have the support to do it. So why don't you consider becoming an area director and step forward? Or, that story that you shared the other night about what you were struggling with? I know a couple other people who are dealing with that same situation. And if you would share that speech to them so that they could hear it, they would know they're not alone and they'd be able to have somebody they could relate to. I haven't told you I wanted you to do anything. I've asked you if you'd be willing to share with others so that they gained from you. And that's how we have to shift the dynamic. We have to shift it from, hey, we need you to do this, to if you do this, others are going to gain so much from it.
Thank you. And now I give the word to Margarita.
Thank you very much for your insights about the we and me culture. I understood very much from your thoughts that you do not consider them to be so much apart, but being very much embedded or entangled with each other. Mm. But let's take a very practical example in Toastmasters. Across our district, but many other districts as well, we are at times thoroughly challenged to find, for instance, volunteers. Mm. And when we are reaching out to people, we understandably, from their perspective, get a whole list of reasons why they don't have time, why they are not interested, why it doesn't fit their current situation. Mm. How would you, in such an environment, encourage a better balance between the we and the me in order to ensure that NGOs as ours are continuing to strive?
Yeah. So I think that there's more to it than just that, because it might seem like it's a me versus we at that point just by the statements. But if someone doesn't have the time, that's not a me thing. That's a reality thing. There's no time there for it. I think when we start hearing concerns about, I can't do it because of there's too much work to do. That we often hear that, right? There's too much expectation. I can't give 20 hours a week to Toastmasters International. I barely have time for it. I can't be a leader. Then that's not necessarily a we, that's a perception that we have to find a way to shift. We have, unfortunately, done a really good job in this organization of selling this as an individualistic role. And what I mean by that is, hey, as an area director, you're expected to do this work. We don't ever sell it as an area director, you have the ability to build a team of individuals to help you do something, to help share that load, to help accomplish the task, to help you gain the skills you need to gain. We've never done that. At least I've never seen it. The other thing that I have seen that has been very detrimental to us is we've had individuals in leadership roles, and not necessarily in your district, so I'm not saying that, but have had just a poor experience. I'm going to use poor as a nice term for it, but just a poor experience. And they are very verbal about it. They're very vocal. And if I'm at the end of the year going, that was the worst experience I ever had being an area director. The senior team was never in contact with me. They kept telling me all this stuff I needed to do, which they didn't tell me I was going to need to do at the beginning of the year. How many people do you think are going to line up behind me to take on that role the next year? None. None. And that's become a big issue, is that one, expectations are not set properly or not explained properly. And then we have disappearing leadership that is not there to support. And that's problematic. You know, I used to say jokingly, but unfortunately, it was almost a self-fulfilling prophecy that when we put the I in front of a past district leader, it doesn't mean immediate. It means invisible. And a lot of them just disappear. And they're the ones there that should be mentoring and helping and guiding. But it doesn't happen. And then as that leadership vacuum starts to develop, it gets harder and harder and harder to fill that vacuum in until someone stands up and shifts the culture and shifts the philosophy. There's two statements that I've heard from leaders that always bothered me. One, it's my district year. No, you just happen to be the leader in that year. It has nothing to do with your district year. The second is when a district achieves distinguished or better, the district director at the time will come back and say, I was a distinguished district director. No, you were a district director of a distinguished district. The district got you distinguished. You did it. You may have led it, but others got you there. And if we're not sharing the successes, if we're not promoting what the individual can gain, not what we gain from the individual, it's going to be harder and harder for them to step forward. And yes, I understand districts that are multiple countries have a distinct challenge because of the cultural differences, the philosophies, the time zones, a lot of that goes into it. I trust me, I appreciate the district leaders that have multiple countries under their belt because I don't know how you do it. I really don't, because I know you've got a lot of challenges to deal with, and you've got financial differences and all that. But you are leaders that set the bar. You really are in what you do. And in watching how you handle it, watching what you share, you truly are amazing leaders with different skill sets than others have. But it's until we sell it as what the benefit to the individual is and not what the benefit to the organization is, we have a hard time changing that.
Thank you very much.
Sia.
Thank you. I just wanted to say I'm very new to, well, relatively new to Toastmasters because I joined Toastmasters several years ago and then dropped out for a long while during COVID. And I wanted to say that I'm here thanks to my area director, who is trying very hard to help us get our club moving
Hmm.
and we have an objective this year, which is to become a distinguished club in our region. And I'm in this French-speaking part of Switzerland.
Oh,
And,
very nice.
yeah, in Geneva. So we're the only French-speaking Toastmasters club. And I joined that particular one because I wanted to improve my public speaking, not only in English, but in French as well. French is my second language. And yeah, I just wanted to say that I really appreciate this session tonight, not only because the topic is extremely interesting and appropriate to what we're going through as a club, but also it made me think about, there's so many things that it made me think about. One of them was that in Switzerland, we have this very individualistic culture as well, but then yet we have a government which is a very much a we culture, because our president only lasts 1 year and we have 7 presidents and they rotate. So it's a very much a we culture in that sense. So I just wanted to share that.
Excellent.
And the other thing I wanted to share was, did you notice that the difference between we and me is just the same letter turned upside down?
Yeah. Yep. It's a mirror image of each other.
Yeah.
If you put them on a mirror, you get the same words. Yep, absolutely.
So anyway, thank you very much.
Oh, no, thank you very much. And well, welcome back to Toastmasters. I hope the club is doing well. And, there was something that you said that really stuck with me. And it was that you said your club wants to become a distinguished club. Okay. And I appreciate that because that's realistic. There are times when I'll hear districts or clubs say, we want to be presidents distinguished this year. And you look at the history and they haven't been distinguished in, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And it's like, well, how about if we try to get to the first rung, and then if we get beyond that, we're doing really well. But if we don't shoot for that and we're too busy reaching for the golden ring and we miss everything, right? So I appreciate that. Hey, let's go for distinguished. Because if we get there, then we know we've got the place to start for the next time. So very well done. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting today. And as much as I am not one that likes to promote, let's do everything online, because personally, I think there's a lot of that interaction that we're missing, a lot of the warmth and all that we miss. The one thing that this has done is allowed for clubs to expand their reach, not only in what they're doing for members, but in bringing guest speakers into their clubs, right? Because right now, it's not uncommon to invite a guest speaker from somewhere else in the world into your club, because right now the biggest hurdle is a time zone when you think about it. So you could reach out to an accredited speaker, a past world champion, past president, and say, hey, can you come and speak at our club? In the past, they couldn't do that. Now, if time permits, they can. So the world has shifted quite a bit. Some for the better, some not. I think there's a Beatles song that says something along those lines, right? Some forever, not for better.
Now, a question from Liesel. Top 3 things one can do to turn either into the other.
Top 3 things one can do to change the other from one to the other. So I think if I'm going to have to assume, probably not the best thing to do, is that we're talking from a personal standpoint, because we can't change others until we change ourselves. So if we're going to try and change from it's all about me situation to it's all about to more of a me-we balance, right? I would look at what it is that is important to me, that's a me thing, that I could share with others, that would then become a we thing. Right? I think that to go from we to me, we also have to address our vulnerability, because you are being vulnerable at that point when you go from me to we. Let's be honest. When we went to Zoom, we increased individuals' vulnerability, right? Because now we are in your home. You might not ever want to invite me into your home, but I'm in your home now, right? So we have to be willing to address the vulnerability. Also, to go from me to we have to have an understanding of the other we's in the group. Right? We can't look at if we're in a group of 4 people, we can't look at 4 individual silos of people, because then that's just 4 individual me's. But if we understand the individuals that are in that collective, if we try to understand that, we try to understand their drivers, our drivers, then we break down some of that barrier between the we and the me. There is always going to be me. There's no situation that there won't be me. Because in some way, shape, or form, me is going to gain something out of this we. Right? Conversely, it's not necessarily true, because if I'm not contributing, the we never gains anything from it. Right? But I'm always going to gain from it. So it's until we break down those barriers, those silos, if you will, that we start relating more as individuals, and not separated, that we can start tearing down those me-we walls. But there's always going to be a me. There just has to be, because you're always going to gain something out of it.
Christina.
Thank you very much. And thanks so much for the speech, because I'm just very, very happy to get some more support and some great ideas in our club. I just joined not too long ago, also in the board. And we were quite a struggling club, I would say, because we didn't have enough members, let alone officers. So to hear exactly the same challenges all over is, of course, creating a little we, and we can tackle it together by sharing the knowledge. So what we also felt helps us already to push forward is kind of creating a system of goals for the club itself, but also at individual level, so that we are kind of pushing each of the club members to improve and nudge a little bit out of their comfort zone, but also not too much, so that we are kind of still creating a safe space while still fulfilling goals at individual level and at the club level. So it's, I don't know, I find it very, very, very interesting to hear the vulnerabilities, the drivers, the synergies that we are having. So thanks for this.
Thank you, Christine. You know, you mentioned something there that I think is important, and it's vision, when we talk about vision. And whether you're a club officer, whether you're an area director, division director, district trio member, a me vision will never be as successful as a we vision. Because when you think about it, we visions are what take the entire club to where it needs to be. Take the area where it needs to, division, the district to where it needs to be. A me vision takes an individual. Okay? So if you're a club president and you want your club to be successful, it has to be a we vision of what success looks like, so that everyone is working towards that same goal, that shared vision. Same thing for an area. If an area is going to be successful or a division is going to be successful, it has to be a shared vision of what that looks like by everybody who's involved, so that you can get there. There's a saying that goes, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with others. Right? And achieving a vision means you're going far, but you have to go with others to do it. So having that shared vision there makes it a we approach. And that's where success comes from.
Without us?
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Richard, for sharing this. It really invited to reflect on we and me. And I personally should admit that I rarely think about whether I'm me or I'm more we.
Mm.
And it came to my mind two different thoughts where typically, for instance, in a meditation, it's mostly about me. But sometimes teachers invite to reflect on what you do as me, how this impact you being in a society, so being part of we, as well as in Toastmasters, as you said, typically we start as me, but over time, me becomes so much less important than we, and your personal goals are somewhere in the back, and you're all about we, how to make the club grow, how to make other people succeed, because that enriches me at the end. So my question or my invitation to reflect from your side would be, how often do you actively try to understand whether you are me or we, and whether you are perceived as we, even though you were trying to be me?
Interesting.
And to maybe the final aspect would be, is it often that you have to invite somebody to say, now I want you to be me, because if you be me, actually we'll all benefit from this, or I really need you to be we, because that's how we will grow the most.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. Not one I had thought about before, because I don't know that I generally go around trying to think about whether it's something I'm doing for me or whether it's something I'm doing for others. Because I think that unless it's something that's specific to me, something that I'm trying to specifically do for myself, maybe a career change or learning, that type of thing, that's specific to me. I think that when I'm engaged in group activities, I think that we have to put that aside, that view of whether it's a me or we view aside, because it would be very hard to separate. I'm doing it for me, but I'm hoping that somebody gets something out of it, making it the we side of it. So I don't know that I've often considered that. That's a great question, though. I'm going to think about that one a little bit more as I start now reflecting upon the things that I'm doing. I think there can be a perception, though, of when you're doing something that you think is a we item, where people might see it as you're doing it as a me type situation, right? And that you're really just doing it for yourself, even though there's other people involved. And that perception could skew the way the results come out to be, right? And when I did the world tour, it had nothing to do with me, but people could say I did it for me, right? Because that was the international president. I could do whatever I wanted at that point. But listen, I didn't want to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to give a pathway speech. That was not in my wheelhouse, not whatsoever. It wasn't about me. But the perception could be one way, right? And I think that's the bigger risk. That's the bigger risk, is that when you are doing something that you're viewing as a betterment of a collective, but for some reason it's being viewed that you're doing it individualistically as a me. That's the bigger risk, I think. And you're never going to get over that 100%, because people are going to perceive things the way people perceive things. I tend to look at it as individuals are there to help individuals to whatever level they can. If the individual who's doing it gains something out of it, good for them. They should. But I'm looking more at what they're doing for others. you know. So, I see the same thing when it comes to officer roles, and I'll ask an individual, would you take on this same role if you weren't getting credit for it? Now, if they say they take it on because the credit's not really the thing, and they're viewing it a little bit differently. All right, let's be honest. We all have done pathways. Don't say no. I know you've all done pathways. And you get that certificate of completion at the end, right? How many of you print them out and hang them on your wall, have them all over the place because that's the important thing? No, that's not the important thing, right? The important thing was the speech and what you did and what you gained from it and what you gave to others from it. It wasn't the piece of paper. The piece of paper is a we, right? The story's the me. So I think society views things a little bit differently, and the individuals around us view things differently. I have very rarely sat with a group of individuals within Toastmasters where I've thought that person is just doing it for themselves. I often see things where people are doing things for others, and that's, to me, is more important. I belong to several other organizations, and I know that Paula's got her hand up there. I do want to get to Paula. I truly, truly believe this, that Toastmasters International is one of the few organizations that has a personal way of changing the lives of people out there. And I say that because many other organizations I belong to, I can write a check to. And that check gets used for something, right? I don't necessarily get to see the change it's made. But I know that I can see an individual come into my club the first night, be purely scared, terrorized of standing at the lectern. We've seen it, white knuckles shaking side to side, right? When you encourage them, you clap. They may have said nothing but a dozen ums, but you still clapped and encouraged them. And they come back to the next meeting. And after 2, 3, 4 meetings, they're giving speeches and their confidence has changed. Who they are has changed. Listen, how many individuals over the last few years have you seen go down the world champion stage and they ask them, how long have you been in Toastmasters? 6 months, a year. They didn't come into the club thinking they were become a world champion. Didn't happen. They came in to gain skills. You help them change into who they are. That's what we do. That's the change we make. That's the impact we make on society.
So we didn't have questions at the beginning, but now we have a lot. And now the last but not least, Paula.
Thank you very much. I really appreciated your description of we and me instead of using the word versus. And I think that many of us in Toastmasters joined Toastmasters for what it could give to us as individuals, but we stayed for the leadership opportunities and we've stayed for the we part of it. Mm-hmm. And similarly, when we're trying to encourage our leaders, it's the same kind of thing. We have to be able to tell individuals, yes, this is what you will get out of it as an individual. I live in North America. I live in a very large metropolitan area. It's a very competitive area from a business perspective. So I can't discount what people want to get out of Toastmasters on a personal level. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, how you transform as an individual and how you develop as an individual. It's just like when you're working with a boss who manages versus a boss who leads. And I think that that's where the difference we can make in Toastmasters. It's okay for people to be in it for their own reasons. I think that that's very valid. but why people stay and why people continue to become engaged is we can incorporate we and not just the me. So I really appreciated that as being very highly motivated to find good succession within the district. That's something that I'm going to really give a lot of thought to. So thank you very much, Richard. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're quite welcome. Thank you, Paula. I am going to post in chat a link to the Hofstede group that I was talking about for any one of you who might want to go in there and drop a couple countries into the comparison table just to see how they play out. Elena, you're on mute. I don't know if you're trying to say something, but
Yes.
if there's other questions that were in the chat room window and you want to send them to me, I'll do my best to respond to you in a reasonable period of time with answers to those questions.
Okay, great. Dear all, please give a warm applause to Richard before we close our meeting.
Thank you
Richard,
all. It's been a
thank
pleasure.
you very much for this inspiring speech. I hope many people were inspired by it. I was, for sure. Thank you for being here with us, and thank you for accepting my invitation. And I hope you had a nice time with us here today.
Always. Always.
Have a nice
Thank
evening,
you, Elena.
day, afternoon, whatever your time zone is. Take
Thank you
care
all.
and have a lovely year ahead.
You as well. You as well. I hope to see all of you at some point in the near future.
Bye-bye. Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Elena.
Sure.
Bye.
Thanks, bye.
Bye, Melton. Nice seeing you again.